My key fob beeped twice, the low sound almost swallowed by the late summer cicadas. The porch light glowed amber against the fading evening, and for a moment the sight of my childhood home, white siding, a crooked mailbox leaning like an old man, pulled a small, familiar ache from my chest. It had been months since my last visit. Work at the design firm in downtown Seattle kept me buried in deadlines. Tonight, all I wanted was the quiet comfort of my old room, the one place that had never changed. But as soon as I pushed open the front door, the smell of fresh paint hit me, sharp, chemical, and nothing like the cinnamon warmth I remembered. Voices floated from upstairs. I climbed the staircase, the wood creaking under my heels, and froze at the landing. My mother knelt by the window, folding tiny dinosaur print sheets into a neat stack. My father balanced a toddler's car seat against his hip. And in the center of my room, walls now painted a cheerful sky blue, my 5-year-old nephew, Caleb, spun in delighted circles. Surprise. Mom looked up, her smile wide and unguarded. We thought it was time Caleb had his own space. You can stay in. Her sentence trailed off when she finally took in my stunned face. The weight of her unfinished words settled in the pit of my stomach, like a verdict I hadn't agreed to, a decision made long before I arrived. The sound of Caleb's giggles blurred into the distant hum of memory. It pulled me back 7 years, to a night when the air inside this same house felt like a storm waiting to break. I was 20 then, fresh from community college with a portfolio of bold sketches and an acceptance letter to a prestigious design program in New York. I'd laid the papers out on this very desk, my heart thudding like a drum, ready to share the news. Dad barely looked up from the evening paper. New York, he said, the word flattening into something that sounded like a warning. Mom's face softened with worry. Lena, that's so far. You don't know anyone there. You have a perfectly good job offer here in town. Honey, it's practical. Practical? The word burned hotter than the August air. I don't want practical, I said, my voice trembling even as I tried to steady it. I want possible. Dad folded his paper with a sharp snap. Dreams don't pay rent. And New York chews people up. You'll be back here in 6 months, if you can even afford the ticket. I felt the sting of every syllable, like they'd found the tenderest place inside me. My hands shook as I reached for the small leather satchel my grandmother had given me the summer before she passed. She'd pressed it into my arms with a quiet smile and whispered, "Fill this with what matters. The rest will follow." That night, while my parents slept, I slid my sketchbooks and the acceptance letter into that satchel. The zipper caught halfway, snagging on the edge of my resolve, but I yanked it closed and hoisted it onto my shoulder. The hallway was a tunnel of shadows as I tiptoed out, the floorboards groaning softly beneath me. At the door, I hesitated, just long enough to hear the house breathing behind me, a life I was about to leave. I didn't look back. Outside, the night smelled of damp earth and possibility. I clutched the satchel to my chest and whispered a promise to the quiet street. I will not come back the same. That vow became the rhythm of every step that followed, away from this house, away from their doubts, and into a future only I could design. New York swallowed me whole at first, its clang of subway brakes, the endless screech of taxi horns, the smell of roasted chestnuts mixing with exhaust. I arrived with 2 suitcases and my grandmother's worn leather satchel, every sketchbook and ounce of courage crammed inside. For the first few months, courage was the only currency I had. My student housing was a single cramped room in a brownstone that smelled perpetually of burnt toast. I waited tables at a cafe where the espresso machine hissed like it resented me. My nails were always chipped. My feet ached from cheap heels that barely survived the rain. But every night, after my shift, I spread my drawings across the small desk by the window. The city lights glittered like 1,000 possibilities, and I let them fuel me. When exhaustion threatened, I'd rest my palm on the smooth leather of the satchel, remembering my grandmother's whisper, "Fill this with what matters." One late evening, my design professor introduced me to Rachel Myers, a celebrated architect known for her uncompromising eye and a silver streak in her black hair that gave her the look of someone who had walked through every kind of storm and won. Rachel studied my sketches in silence. "Your lines are fearless," she finally said. "That's rare. Don't tame them." Those words became a lifeline. Rachel pushed me harder than anyone. She made me redraw plans until dawn, questioned every angle, every shade. When my confidence wavered, she simply raised an eyebrow and said, "You didn't leave home to be ordinary, did you?" With her guidance, my portfolio grew bolder. I landed an internship with a boutique firm. Long hours, grueling deadlines, but the first time a client chose my concept for a downtown gallery, I felt something settle inside me, a quiet assurance that I belonged. Money was scarce at first. I skipped dinners to pay rent and learned the subway map by heart because cabs were a luxury. But slowly, the balance shifted. A stipend became a salary turned into my first big commission, a waterfront art center whose sweeping glass walls caught the morning sun like a prism. I shared only the barest updates with my parents. When Mom called, I spoke of projects without specifics. My social media stayed understated. A photo of city skyline at dawn, a close-up of my coffee cup beside blueprints. No one at home knew that by 27, I had purchased my own area apartment in Brooklyn with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that made the city seem to lean closer when the sun set. Some nights I'd sit cross-legged on the polished concrete floor, that old satchel beside me, still smelling faintly of my grandmother's lavender soap. I'd run my fingers over its worn seams and think of the night I left, how terrified I'd been. Now, terror had turned into triumph. And no one back home had the faintest idea. The following Saturday, I drove the 3 hours back from Seattle in my new graphite gray Tesla, the hum of the engine so quiet it felt like gliding. I hadn't planned this visit. It was a sudden tug. Part irritation, part something softer I wasn't ready to name. The house looked exactly the same as it had the night I left. White siding a little more faded, the crooked mailbox leaning in the same tired direction. I parked at the curb and cut the engine. For a long moment, I sat still, my heartbeat matching the rhythmic tap of autumn rain on the windshield. Inside, the scent of fresh paint lingered. Caleb blew, I thought wryly. My parents were in the living room, my nephew sprawled on the rug with a fleet of toy cars. "Lena." Mom's face lit up as though the years had been nothing but a passing weekend. What a surprise. Dad lowered the sports section, offering a stiff nod. I hung my damp coat on the hook by the door. The leather of my grandmother's satchel, still my constant companion, brushed against my hip. "I wanted to see the famous new room," I said lightly. Mom's smile faltered. "Oh, honey, we didn't mean for you to find out that way. Caleb he needs more space. We thought you could stay in the den when you visit. It's temporary." The den. The converted laundry room with no windows and a pull-out couch that still smelled faintly of bleach. I walked past them without a word, up the familiar staircase. Caleb trailed me, giggling, until Mom called him back. The door to my old room stood wide open. Dinosaur decals dotted the freshly painted blue walls. The shelves where my sketchbooks once sat now held plastic bins of toys. A sharp ache tightened in my chest, but not the ache they expected. This wasn't loss. It was the weight of a truth I'd carried in silence for 7 years. I turned back, finding both of them standing awkwardly in the doorway. "You've redecorated," I said, the corner of my mouth tilting in something close to amusement. Dad cleared his throat. "It just made sense. You're doing fine in the city, right?" I met his eyes. "More than fine." I reached into the satchel and pulled out a slim leather portfolio, the same one Rachel had insisted I carry to every important meeting. From it, I slid a single glossy print onto Caleb's new dinosaur bedspread. It was the rendering of my latest project, a shimmering, glass-walled art center soon to break ground on the Seattle waterfront. At the bottom, my name, lead architect, Lena Morrison. Dad frowned. "This is yours." "Designed it. Won the city commission last month." Mom's hand went to her mouth. "Oh, sweetheart." And I added, keeping my voice calm, "I bought a loft downtown. Top floor. 3 bedrooms. Plenty of light for my sketches. Silence thick in the air. Caleb's toy car rattled across the floor and bumped against my foot before he scurried to retrieve it. Dad looked at the print again, his jaw working as if words were a foreign language. I didn't know. No, I said gently. You didn't. I never told you. Mom's eyes shimmered. Lena, we only wanted you safe. I know. I let the words settle. But I needed more than safe. And I found it. For a long moment, none of us moved. Rain tapped the windows, steady and patient. Finally, Dad let out a breath that sounded almost like surrender. Well, he said quietly, looks like you did more than all right. I smiled, not out of triumph, but something deeper, recognition, perhaps, of the woman I had become. I let the quiet stretch, a gentle tension that made every creak of the old house feel louder. Caleb drove his tiny blue car in looping circles across the hardwood, blissfully unaware of the storm of realizations gathering above him. When I finally spoke, my voice was even, neither sharp nor accusing. I didn't come back to fight. I came back because this house will always be a part of me. But things can't go back to the way they were. Mom's hands twisted together. We only wanted Caleb to have a room. We didn't mean to. I raised a hand, stopping her with a small shake of my head. This isn't about the room. It's about how we treat each other. About how you treated me when I said I had dreams bigger than this town. Dad shifted uncomfortably. The old recliner groaned beneath him. I'm not here to hold a grudge. I continued, the leather satchel warm against my side like a heartbeat. But if we're going to stay in each other's lives, some things have to change. Mom's voice came out soft. What things? I met her eyes. First, no more dismissing someone's dreams because they scare you. Whether it's Caleb or me or anyone else. Fear isn't love. It's control, and it hurts. Dad opened his mouth, closed it again. Second, I said, if you want to be part of my life, you have to see me, the real me. Not the version you imagined when I was 20. I need you to respect the choices I've made without trying to shrink them to fit your comfort. Mom blinked back tears. Dad stared at the floor, his hands clasped like a man in church. And finally, I added, turning to Caleb with a small smile, help him dream big. If he wants to build rockets or write novels or dance on Broadway, you cheer him on, even when it scares you. Caleb looked up from his cars, his little brow furrowed. Broadway, he asked. I laughed softly. Or dinosaurs, buddy. Whatever makes you happy. The tension in the room eased, like a knot finally loosened. Dad cleared his throat. You're right, he said quietly. He stopped, then tried again. I was wrong to push you toward safe. I didn't see this. He gestured vaguely toward the rendering of the art center, but I knew he meant me. Mom wiped her eyes. We're proud of you, Lena. We didn't know how to be. I let their words settle like rain soaking into dry earth. Compassion rose, but it wasn't the old need for approval. It was something steadier, a strength that didn't depend on them. This isn't about blame, I said. It's about growth for all of us. I love you both, but I need us to love each other without fear. Dad gave a slow nod, the kind that carried the weight of unspoken promises. The evening slipped into a soft, reflective hush. The rain had stopped, leaving the windows streaked with silver trails that caught the glow of the porch light. Caleb yawned, abandoning his toy cars in a crooked line across the rug. Mom gathered him into her arms. Bedtime, little man. She kissed the top of his head and glanced at me with a tentative smile. Want to tuck him in? I followed them upstairs. The blue walls of what had been my room no longer stung. They pulsed with a quiet new purpose. Caleb's eyelids fluttered as I pulled the dinosaur blanket to his chin. You gonna build that big shiny building you showed me? He murmured, his voice thick with sleep. I already am, I whispered. And one day, you'll build something even bigger. He smiled, drifting away into dreams. Back in the hallway, Mom touched my arm. Thank you for saying what we needed to hear. We were so afraid of losing you. We didn't see we were pushing you away. Dad stood beside her, his usual stoic posture softened. "I'll do better," he said simply.
For you.
For Caleb. The sincerity in his voice settled deep inside me, not as an apology to erase the past, but as a seed of something new. Later, alone in the quiet den, the room they'd offered as my temporary space, I set my grandmother's leather satchel on the small desk. The scent of lavender soap still lingered faintly, carrying me back to the night I left. I unzipped it and drew out the first sketch I'd ever made of the waterfront art center. Bold, untamed lines scrawled across wrinkled paper. My thumb traced the familiar strokes, and a wave of gratitude swelled. Gratitude for the pain, the stubbornness, the years of building a life on my own terms. Outside, the moonlight pooled across the lawn like a quiet benediction. "They said I could stay in the den," I murmured, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. The words tasted different now, not like rejection, but like a reminder of how far I'd come. I slipped the sketch back into the satchel and closed the zipper with a soft, final click. "I already have a place," I whispered to the night. "And it's exactly where I choose to belong."